And now we can go into our hue module. So on its face, the hue module is very simple. This is really just a way of manipulating hue versus hue. So it's a way of saying, what hue do I want to impart onto, what output hue do I want to impart onto a particular input hue, okay? So we can do things like move our reds up or down or any of our other colors in a fairly intuitive and a fairly familiar way. But there's several things in here that are really special that make this a great hue rotation tool for look development. The first thing that is in place here is we have boundaries in place. If I look at a hue versus hue tool here inside of Resolve, it's very easy for me to say, grab my default red goalposts, or even let's grab my yellows, be a little bit easier to visualize. So I've got my goalposts left and right here. There is no rule, there is no boundary, there is no constraint in place to stop me from rotating this hue right past this edge or that edge. When I do that, when I get that over rotation, when I get that folding, when I get that crossover, that's a time bomb. Sooner or later, even if it's not creating a problem on the particular image that I'm working on, sooner or later, it will create a problem. That's something that any good look development tool should not allow you to do. A good look development tool should provide a framework and guardrails for you when you're working so that you're not having to be your own lifeguard while you're in the process of creating beautiful looks, okay? So that's the first thing, is our max strengths here are constrained such that we are not going to fold things over. And another part of that, if we look at, I don't know, let's say we want to do something like, let's say we're looking at our yellows and maybe we want to warm these yellows up a little bit, which by the way is a very filmy thing. It's something that can look really nice in a look. I'm just going to warm my yellows up a little bit. And when I say warm them up, I mean I'm going to rotate them a bit more toward orange than they were before, okay? And let's go extreme with this just for the sake of an example here. I'm going to go really hard with my yellows. And now let's say I take my reds and I want to pull them in this direction. So in this case, I have two neighboring hues, yellow and red, and they are being pushed toward each other. Red is being pulled more orangey yellow, yellow is being pushed more orangey red, right? That's another really easy way to get that crossover, to get that folding that I was talking about a minute ago. And we need to have guardrails in place to deal with this. But ideally, those guardrails wouldn't just be fixed and say, hey, you can never go above this because I'm worried that you might create folding or artifacting in your image. So check out what's happening. You can see it visually, but you can also see it in this curve. If I reset this red, look at my yellow curve that I made my adjustment with here. It was here, I've gone there, and as I start to push red toward it and create that tension, the peak of my yellow is actually dropping down to prevent that folding. And that's going to be the same with every primary inside of the hue module. Anytime you are making a primary rotation and it is pushing against a secondary rotation, that secondary rotation will be scaled such that you're not getting breakage, you're not getting artifacting, you're not getting folding. The logic there, primary rotations are going to be more impactful on the image than secondary rotations. So Contour says, hey, if you're asking me for that big of a red rotation, I believe you. I'm going to trust that that's important to you, that you want that, and I'm going to scale your secondaries such that you don't end up with artifacting or folding, but you are getting as much of the effect from your, in this case, yellow rotation as you can get while still keeping the image clean. So that's kind of a built-in guardrail that we have available to us within Contour so that we don't ever run into a situation where we are over-rotating things and getting into artifacts or tearing or other problems that can arise from doing that kind of operation. There's also our focus slider here, which let's reset everything here and kind of go back to what we were doing a moment ago. I'm going to rotate my yellows. And let's also say, I don't know, let's go back over to this shot here, actually. And so we've got our yellows warmed up a little bit. And let's also say, like, I want to get these washing machines like pure red or even a little bit overclocked past red. Let's just see if I can pull that off. So I'm going to rotate, rotate, rotate. That's doing the thing that I want. Like, that's really getting these washing machines like standing straight up in the vector scope, right? But it's doing something else, isn't it? How's my guy look here? It's not looking his best anymore. This hue rotation is sweeping him up with the move. Because it is intentionally a broad rotation, we want it to be broad, but because it is broad, skin tone is largely being absorbed in this same rotation. This is where the focus slider in the hue module comes in. Now, the focus slider is not narrowing the goalposts of the hue angle as you might expect. It's actually being selective based on saturation. Because what so often happens is we want to make hue rotations. We want to really refine or define the color palette of a project. And that often happens with more colorful stuff. And where we usually can get away with less is in lower saturation areas like skin tone. That's where memory colors tend to live. That's where colors tend to live that the viewer has more built-in idea of or expectation of. So this rotation, as it stands right now, looks great on the washing machine, completely failing on the way it's treating skin, right? So if we take this focus slider, watch what happens. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And I'm going to start to increase this until now I'm not having an effect on his skin. And now I'm not even having an effect on his beard. And yet I'm still getting that really nice effect back there on the washing machines, right? So that's the idea. There's this focus slider allows you to say, oh yeah, I want to rotate my reds, but not the reds of things like my memory colors or my skin tones. So that's the way that we can go about getting that kind of effect without affecting things in the lower saturation ranges. That's why that focus slider works as it does. The other thing that can be really nice here, if we go back to, say, our other example of rotating our yellows. And by the way, look at what I predict here is I think we're probably going to see a little rotation in her lips if they are saturated enough, but we're not going to see any change in her skin. In fact, her lips aren't saturated enough, but I've got this big fat red rotation that's happening that I'm not seeing any impact from in my image at all because no colors meet the criteria that I've defined for that red rotation, all right? But what I wanted to show you here in this image is this yellow rotation. So we've already done that here. Let me zoom out a little bit and we can see how that yellow rotation is working. Let's actually reset and just hit that yellow like so. And turn that back on. Something else really fun that we can do here is instead of using our focus, we can use our loom mask to get what's usually called in film literature and in like film work in general, unstable primaries. That just means that if I have a yellow and I photograph a low exposure yellow and then a medium exposure yellow and then a high exposure yellow, those will capture and print different hues in the final image. It sounds kind of crazy. It sounds like something you might not want. Turns out it's something that lends film part of its magic, part of its feel, part of its aesthetic. We can recreate that here in Contour, that feeling of those unstable primaries with a loom mask. So if I drop my loom mask like so, and I flip it, now I'm saying you must fall above a certain luminance threshold in order to be rotated. And just like with our focus, just like with everything here in Contour, this narrowing, this selection of color based on a second criteria, in this case luminance, it's nice and broad and soft. So it's not going to break, it's not going to create artifacts, it's not going to leave fingerprints behind. But what it will allow you to do is to subtly rotate your colors, in this case your yellows, just in a certain region, which is a very filmic thing to do because that's how the primaries work in film. As you climb the tone scale, your effective hue angle changes. So you've got that ability to create those unstable primaries right here within the tool.